When I asked, well, what are you doing in your free time now? They said, oh, I like to pump iron.
Oh. Welcome to MBA PodTV. I'm your host, Mia Saini. This week we bring you special coverage of an MBA admissions panel that I moderated at the Access MBA panel in New York City. Access MBA puts on a series of MBA events around the world where you can meet one-on-one with admissions directors. The topic of the panel is how to get admitted to a top MBA program. The panelists will go over some of the common mistakes applicants make when writing their essays, during the MBA interview, and when prepping for the GMAT. You'll also get valuable insight on what schools are looking for in candidates. The panelists include Eric Allen, director and co-founder of Admit Advantage, David Malloy, a GMAT instructor with Manhattan GMAT, John Roeder, director of admissions at Vanderbilt Owen Graduate School of Management, and Kim Janulewicz from IE Business School.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Mia Saini. I'm a second-year MBA student at the Harvard Business School. I'm also the video host of MBA PodTV on MBAPodcaster.com. I'm excited to be here today to talk about the question, how to be admitted to the top MBA program. We've got a great group of panelists today who are excited to share with you their rationale and their reasons. Let's start off by asking the panel, what is the added value of an MBA? Clearly, we're facing unprecedented times given the current tumultuous times in the economic situation. What exactly is the value add that an MBA brings?
The MBA in certain career paths is becoming a required credential to have to get into certain levels within organizations. So it's something that looking at your own personal career path, you may find that it will be essential at some point in the line. I would also say really just to really elevate your career to that next level. What I found to be the difference between undergraduate business and graduate business was really in the undergraduate classes, in the setting that you were in, it often was very siloed between marketing and accounting and operations and all these other areas, whereas once you get into the graduate perspective within an MBA program, you're really looking at the holistic approach of looking strategically at an organization and really how decisions on, for instance, the accounting side can impact finance or marketing or operations impacts. And I think that really being able to take all those pieces and put them together within an MBA world where you're devoting perhaps 2 years of your life to this experience, where you're actually able to apply what you're learning in the classroom to the various experiences that you have in your career and your background, but also learning from those around you within an MBA program, because half of what you're going to learn in an MBA program is going to be from the people sitting to your right and your left, and that's very unique among graduate degrees. If you're looking at a med school or a law school and that's what they tell you, I'd be very worried about going to that med school or law school.
Next question I have is, how many schools is the right number of schools to apply to? And many schools offer round 1 versus round 2 versus round 3. When is the ideal time to apply?
So I would say not round 3. And I would say that you should apply when you're ready. So a round 2 application that is well thought out, you've taken the time to invest in it, is much, much better than a round 1 application that you rushed in and submitted, 11:59 the day before. So, I'd be curious to hear, John's opinion, but I think that there is a little bit of a difference between round 1 and round 2, but it's slight. And again, I think you should really focus on applying when you're ready. In terms of number of schools, I would say you want to think about where you are in the process. Some people come in and they say, all right, I want to get into these 3 schools, and if I don't get into those schools, I'm not going to business school, and that's okay. And so, in that case, it'll be those particular schools. If you are saying, hey, I'm in a career, position in my career where I'm ready to go this year, pretty much no matter what, then you need to have a balance of schools. Maybe you have a couple of schools that are a little bit outside of your range, the stretch schools, you probably hear that term, and then have a core set of target schools. But target schools that you put time into, to the point earlier that perhaps you visited. If you haven't visited, hopefully you've talked to alums. Schools that you've thought about that you actually will go to if you don't get into some of those stretch schools. So Is there a number? No, but I think you need to think about, what your strategy is for applying, whether or not you're kind of going hey, I'm going to shoot for the stars, and if I don't get in, I'm going to do it again, in a year or two, or I'm going to business school this year and I need a more balanced set of schools.
And another thing to think about when you're thinking about the rounds, and certainly ask all the schools that you're seriously considering, is the financial situation that you will be in. Certain schools, you have better opportunities for scholarship in earlier rounds, for instance, and you'll want to take that into consideration as you target what round to actually apply in. If you apply in the final round and it turns out that there are no scholarship opportunities in that round, and that was a big difference maker for you, then you would have been better off going earlier or waiting a year. The other aspect on how many to actually apply to, it differs person to person. I'm one who applied to one school. I had an interesting situation because my wife was working at KPMG. I was working in Anderson. We lived in the Dallas area, and we had an agreement. She'd support me to go through an MBA program, but we weren't leaving the DFW area. So that really limited my application process, and it made it quite easy for me. But as far as just kind of thinking about your particular situation, you may be applying to a number of programs because of a geographic consideration, or because they have a certain specialization at certain programs that you're looking for, and you want to make sure that you're in a program that has that specialization. Oftentimes, the admissions committees actually will ask you, whether it be in the interview or whether it be in the actual application, where else you're considering and where are you applying to. We're interested in learning a little bit about your decision capabilities and how you go about making decisions. And if you say that you're absolutely, you want to be in a smaller school on the East Coast, and then we ask you where you're applying, and you're applying to Stanford and Chicago and a whole bunch of other schools, and we'll wonder about your decision-making capabilities. So really being able to answer that question is going to be something that's going to probably be put in front of you at some point in the admissions process.
Thank you. I'm curious, and I'm sure some of the members of our audience as well, what are some of the horror stories that you've seen over the years in terms of maybe candidates who haphazardly put together their application, or horror stories within the interview process, or even through the actual application itself? I'm curious to hear your opinions.
Like, one thing I definitely see all the time in students who are preparing for the GMAT is, like, I'll have a student who I meet for the first time with private tutoring, and they'll come and they'll say, okay, well, in the last 5 days, I took 5 diagnostic tests. I took one this day and I got a 570, the next day I got a 580, the next day I got a 560, the next day I got a 550, and I'm not seeing any change. And I'm saying, well, of course you haven't, because you're just trying to do as many problems as possible without actually going back and reviewing those questions really, really carefully. And so that's a big myth with GMAT preparation, that people just tend to think, if I just go and do every single question in the official guide, I'll do really well in the GMAT. Whereas I'd much rather see people do half the questions, but then spend twice as much time reviewing those questions and really going into them deeply.
I had an interview with a person who told me that they applied to business school because they had been out of they'd been out of work for a year and a half, and they just didn't have really anything else to do. And when I asked them, kind of what they'd been doing in their job search, they said, oh, well, I applied to some companies and that just didn't work out. And when I asked, well, what are you doing in your free time now? They said, oh, I like to pump iron. So, make sure that that what you're telling about yourself is going to be relevant and is going to be interesting to the school.
One of the areas that all schools will be looking at is your letters of recommendation, and I think one of the biggest mistakes you can go do is go for whatever the highest ranking official possible, the CEO of the company, or maybe a senator, or whatever it may be, when that person really doesn't know you well, or does not know your work abilities or what you did, because it's very obvious when the letter comes in to the admissions committee the amount of detail that's in the letter that the person perhaps didn't even know you. So I would absolutely go after the people that can really speak to your work abilities and how you performed. Previous supervisors are great to have. Current supervisors, if you're going to tell your company you're going back to pursue your MBA, are great to have as well. And take that person to lunch. Sit down with them. Talk to them about why you're looking to get an MBA, what you're looking to do with your career. It will certainly make for a much better recommendation when they actually sit down to write it. And the other aspect on the interview side is be aware, for instance, if you're visiting campus, that potentially you're being interviewed by everyone you interact with. A big mistake would be to assume your interview is over when you're done meeting with the admissions representative and then go treat a receptionist rudely or someone, a student host, because those people might actually have input that gets back to the admissions committees. I know at a lot of schools that is the case, and you may not know that, but it's better to be aware of that now than find out later.
With that, I want to thank Eric Allen, John Roeder, Kim, as well as Dave Malloy. Thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, that's it for MBA Pod TV. I'm your host, Mia Saini. Join us on MBAPodcaster.com to register for our weekly audio and video shows. And of course, join us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.